All right, what time have we got? Oh, okay, we're past time. We're up to 15 participants. I'm guessing that we're going to get a few more as we're moving through. But if we can be putting our name in the roll call at the on the agenda, that would be great, please. What have I got? What time have we got? Oh, okay. I'm not getting the chat sorted out. There we go. Okay, so
thank God.
Probably good.
Probably a good thing.
I was looking to see if that little red light was on or not. I don't think we need a McAfee in the Telos community.
Phil, have you got the agenda now? I've put it in the chat, I think.
Yep.
Cool.
I'll take the notes.
Thank you. Much appreciated. So if we could be doing our roll call thing, please, guys, I'd appreciate it. I shall, as we're recording, we'll start the meeting. So it's the Telos Launch Group call, 26th of October 2018. Welcome, everybody. We are up to what we're up to now, 24 participants, so I think we're pretty good to go. Right. Okay, then. So I'm not going to do item 1 takeaways from last week because they are going to be covered as we go down the agenda. So the first thing on the call, all the usual requests for the call, please. First time you come on, if you could say your name and your organisation. I'm Jim from Telos UK, for example. So item 3 on the agenda is the proposed document that was proposed by the governance group for the proposed amendments to Telos governance documents. I would like to request that this was discussed last week and it's been discussed in the governance channel. The governance channel has proposed it and is recommending it. I would like to get a seconder, someone proposed to go for a vote and a seconder without any discussion, if that is possible, because unless I've seen no talk in the Slack channels about this, I think it can go through on the nod personally, unless anybody's got any particular reason to discuss anything. Anybody wish to discuss any points that I would like to bring up? Would it be possible to have a proposer and a seconder for the motion? Shall the Telos contributors group adopt the proposed amendments to Telos governance documents?
I move that we call for the vote to approve this.
Thank you, Jerry. Do I have a seconder?
Oh, sorry, that was Jerry from Blind Block Art.
Yeah, JT from Kanos BP. A second.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to attempt to put the question in the chat. Douglas will give it a quick look to make sure I've done it right, and then if everyone could vote, please. Okay, guys, if you could vote away, I'd appreciate it. Thank you. I am hoping now that if we do get these this to go through, which just from a casual look over in the channel looks like it may well do, I now think we have a complete set of governance documents. I've got the double fist pump from Douglas, so I think that's a definite go. which I think is quite a momentous occasion. So I'm going to pat myself on the back. So I think we did well there, guys. So well done. Okay, so all the other votes are going to be as simple as that, and we should be done in about 10 minutes. Is that all right, guys? I'll get, yeah, here we go. Okay then, so we're going to be moving on to item 4, which is voting on the Telos improvement proposal, the tips. We have got 4 or 5 tips ready to vote because, as we say, we have to have them proposed to the meeting. These were proposed at the last meeting. We have had some discussion in the Slack channels, and oh, sorry, Adam, are you okay to do your do all your stuff? Thank you on the results. Appreciate it. Thank you. So, sorry, say that again. Okay, yeah, please. So we've had 21 yeses and 7 abstentions. So is my maths correct that that's been passed? Thank you very much. Okay, so we're now moving on to tip 24, which is there is a link to the GitHub on the agenda, and it is we've got it's adequately rewarded the Telos contributions. Author was Michael. Do we want to? I'm going to open this up. I think the crux of the tip was to increase from 6 to 12, unless that's changed, million as a point of the rewards. So I'm just going to open this to the floor and let people talk away. There's been lots of chatter, so I'm sure that we can move forward on this. If you want to either put your hand up or ping me in the chat or whatever, but I'm going to shut up now and let people have a chance to talk about tip 24, please.
There were several tips that had not been voted on before 24.
Yeah, I can see that, Jerry. I can appreciate that, but just if the meeting will indulge me, because I'm trying to get through these were the ones that we'd come straight up for, and I'm happy to go back through all the tips and vote them through if you like. But I know tip 3 is what Jesse wanted to put forward, and we can go back through do that, or we can do that on Tuesday. Douglas, do you want to speak on that?
Yeah, there was some discussion. I think it'd be great if we follow the process, discuss those, at least introduce them at the end of today's meeting, and then voted them on our next meeting. They are old and they all deserve to be voted, but I think that would be within the process here.
I just think that while we've got our minds trained on the current tips, I just feel it would be better if the meeting stuck to those for the moment.
Oh,
and if we have time,
I'm suggesting the same thing. I'm just saying at the end of the meeting.
I realise that, Douglas. So can I ask if Jesse, I do realise what you're saying, and we will get to the tip, and we will hoover up all the tips and get them. I will do something so on Tuesday's call that everything gets put forward, and do some housekeeping on those. But if we could move forward on 24, I'd really appreciate it. Anybody got anything to say?
I'm for increasing the amount, but I would like to see a limit if it's adopted. And maybe 18 is better than 12.
Okay, so I know that there's been some discussion, Jerry, you've been talking about limited individuals and captains, et cetera, Is that the sort of thing that you're talking about, that you've been discussing in Slack?
Yes, if we have a limit on, if you limit the number of slices to a percentage, then the pie actually gets a little more even. You have a lot of the maximum slices, and then a chunk with the rest of the people. This spreads it out to a much wider group, and still, I'm hoping, compensates the people that have done most of the work. I'm going to shut up.
Yeah, thanks for that, Joe. Does anybody else want to come in here?
Well, I was just going to say, what would that cap look like then? Could we talk about that, or is this not the place to talk about that, and we have to?
Well, for that cap, I introduced a tip 29 just to give some numbers in there. This is just for information.
How do we go on with tip 24 and tip 29 needing?
If we can modify tip 24 to include a cap, and I was throwing out 4%, which if we increase to 18 million, which is still not a huge number percentage wise, the cap would be 720,000 telos if you hit the cap, and it would spread the people who got the maximum to somewhere around 16 to 18, I believe, which would come out to what? The numbers. Anyway, there's about 5 million left to spread to 54 people.
Right. So tip 29 is looking at this in a different way, from an angle of someone who is outside this immediate community and how all of this would be interpreted. So I just put some percentage figures in there. And basically what that tip is saying is, if we approve to increase the allocation to the founding members, then we should really need to take into consideration how will that sort of pan out in terms of individual teams, whether they're labeled as BPs or a business or an entity, in terms of the final amount, a percentage of the total Telos tokens out there. So that is the purpose of that tip. But at the same time, obviously, it will have an effect on the allocations.
This is actually just a bunch of individual contributors. Yes, we know that 12 or 14 of them work for GoodBlock, but they're still individual contributors. And the pie slicing is designed to reward the individuals. And so it's just, if we put a cap, and I'm hoping that it might be easy for Rob to, if you add just a cap, if it's above a certain point, it spreads the pie out in a little bit different shape, where more people would be at that 4%, but the rest would be jumbled. As it is now, 4 people take up half of the pie.
Okay, so that seems sensible, but obviously we'd have to look at how those numbers exactly pan out, wouldn't we, before we could vote on tip 24, or somehow that would need to get included in tip 24, would it?
Right.
So how's that going to happen?
In my opinion, I feel like we should keep the tip 24, where we could just all come to a consensus and give up a number for the rewards pool, where we could agree on the number, because in my opinion, I don't think we would reach a consensus on the cap or any other limiting percentage today in this discussion. And I know we have been discussing a lot, even in the Slack channel. And Azad included the tip 29, which is essentially the cap or limit, and we can all discuss about the caps. And maybe in the next call, we could vote on the limit or cap. But I think today we should agree on the exact number for the rewards pool and vote on it, basically, whether to increase it or not.
Yes, I would support that position.
I would move that we change the number to 18 million.
Yes, we are open to modifying the tip 24 based on whatever all of the community agrees on. And we can
It's
increase
Sayed,
the
I
number.
also agree that at least 18 million or more.
I second the proposal to move it to 18 million. This is Ian from Amplified.
Yeah, and it looks like 18 million is roughly, I think, around 5% for the founders, which is still well under the typical range. So that is good. I think that we still maintain the advantage of the fairest allocation we can, and still keep it a humble founding ownership as opposed to 10 to 30%.
All right. Well, it sounds that we why don't we take a vote on the 18, Jim, and see if that passes, so we can move along.
Well, hang on this, I just want to let a few more people add before we decide who's voting on what. Let's just see if the discussion's coming out anymore, because thanks for the contribution, Rob, and from other people. Is there anybody else who's been in the Slack channels who wants to contribute to the 18? There was a big pushback on moving from 6 a few weeks ago. Have we come to a consensus that we wish to do that now?
My biggest complaint from before was attaching all of the different changes to one big tip. I like the idea of breaking it out into simpler tips that we can come to consensus on each thing we're proposing to tweak. So that's why I was mostly against the initial suggestions. And I also think, while at first I was opposed to increasing the TFRP at the last minute, which is essentially what this is doing, we also have more information about how many people came in, how many teams came in. This is a moment to make a strategic decision to capitalize all these teams that are aligned to make Telos better. So maintaining the balance of the fairness and decentralization ethos of Telos with making the strategic decision to amplify all these teams. This seems really smart strategically. I don't agree with a lot of the other proposed economic changes, but this one in particular makes a lot of sense, I think.
Okay, then. So I'm getting a consensus that people wish to vote on the tip, but the tip being amended to 18 million. Is 21 Zephyr okay for changing the tip to 18 million? Is that something that you will be happy to do?
Yes.
Okay.
I just want to confirm one thing. The intention of increasing the founders reward pool is to provide more to the smaller contributors. Is that the goal of this? I just have a concern that if we don't plan on doing the cap, then are we increasing this without really accomplishing the goal?
That's a good point, Jesse. If I could speak to it for a minute, I don't think that we should actually change the model. I don't agree with that in general of capping, but there is an interesting loophole where that I think Good Block actually proposed pledging to cap themselves at a certain percentage. And so I like that because it doesn't break the model, but it's them saying, we acknowledge that we want to spread this out more and that we'll have more than enough. If we go over this percent, we're only going to cap ourselves here. And it still doesn't break the model, what we agreed to. So that's kind of where I'm at on it. I don't really want to pass caps in a tip. Personally, I think that it should be voluntary from some of the orgs that take larger slices of the pie.
Rob, may I ask, from what I've seen, this is Ian, sorry guys, from what I've seen in the Slack discussions, I think, and Douglas, please correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you pledged to self-impose a limit for Good Block of 75% of the tokens from the Founders Rewards group. if that were the case and we increased it to 18 million, that would come out to 13.5 million tokens. So my question to the group as a whole is, do you think that 75% is a sufficiently low pledge, or would you want to see a lower number there? I just asked that for conversation.
Yeah, that's a great question. If I could, we actually were kind of talking about this yesterday, and I think if we increased the rewards pool, especially by a factor of 3, then the pledge ideally would come down, because either way, if we adjust the number right, Good Block's still getting an advantage. There's just like a sort of a dampening effect on the people who are going to get the most, so that we can spread it out more to the rest. So I would say, personally, I would hope they would lower it from 75 if we pass this to increase the pool so much.
Can I say something?
Yeah.
I want to say that the model has already been broken, because we are not reporting on the same criteria. So different people are reporting on the different criteria. So I just want to say about the model that is already broken.
I would jump in here just to address that and say the model has subjectivity built into it, and it's on the chairs to ensure the accuracy of the model collectively and manage the model. So it's an experiment, and it's messy, as we're all seeing, but it's not necessarily that the model broke. If we do start to impose caps, then we're breaking the intention of slicing pie.
I don't want to go into discussing the ramifications of work groups, etc., at the moment, because I think we need to get the basis there first. Douglas, would you mind saying your piece if you wish to, please?
Yeah, thanks, Jim. We were not going to comment on this at all, and we're still not going to comment or vote on this because there's just too much self-interest. But I do want to confirm what Rob said in his direct question. In fact, so when we said 75% as a cap, as a self-imposed cap, that was like an opening position, just because there was a lot of hubbub and we wanted to settle it down. If in fact this is changed, we will cap at a lower amount. We had discussed 2/3, but we can discuss it. I think that is discussion that can happen offline. And I would also, if we cap as the largest group, I would also encourage any other groups that have that anticipate a very large percentage afterwards to also consider a cap.
Douglas, may I ask you a question? So my understanding, and again, I want your input here. When you proposed the 75% cap, that was within the context of the status quo, which is a $6 million reward for the launch group. Am I hearing you correctly when you say that if we were to, say, triple the size of the launch group reward, you would therefore be more amenable to a lower cap that you would sort of self-impose? Is that correct?
Yes, that's what I said. This is new information to me. I've actually stayed away from. I've stayed because we stated we weren't going to comment or vote on this. I've actually paid very little attention until yesterday it came up. I don't pay much attention to the slices, and it is very important to me that everyone in the group is well rewarded. Telos is built on a cap, so you know.
So let me ask you this: as a matter of like
that applies to us too. So yeah, so I don't know what the exact amount is. I would say the next point, the next discussion point would probably be 2/3. But yes, we will. You know, let's at this point, if indeed it is raised, yeah, let's talk about 2/3 and then continue discussion from there. Is that
so? Let me ask you a follow-up question then. So as a matter of mechanics, would you feel comfortable with a process where we do vote on, say, an $18 million token reward, and then we sort of have an offline conversation on what an appropriate cap would be, and presumably, if the community as a whole doesn't feel comfortable with the number that Good Block is landing on, there could be a separate tip to lower the number again or modify it afterwards, right? Like in other words, I'm trying to ask if we can decouple the question of the cap from the question of what the reward pool ought to be.
Of course we can. We can do anything, and we are not going. We we are not going to vote or comment directly on things that are purely in our self-interest. And I trust this is a group, this is probably one of the most fair-minded groups that I've ever been in on a project like this. And ultimately, wherever it lands, no one at Good Block is going to starve. I would, if it's discussed more, like to share with people exactly how we intend to use what we end up receiving. So that could be part of the discussion, but we're not going to vote on this, right? So I've already said more about it than I want to. So I think in a democracy, we're just not going to vote, and you guys are all going to vote. So whatever you vote, we're comfortable with.
I've got a slight problem with you not commenting or not voting, Douglas. I appreciate you've got there's an issue with the sort of self-promotion, etc. But I do think that the work that Good Block has done does need rewarding, and I think you should have a voice in this. So, and also, you guys are driving many discussions, and you often should be driving this one as well. But that's just my opinion. Does anybody else want to comment at the moment on at the moment? What I've done in the agenda is I've amended the I probably spelled it wrong, so better check it.
Yeah, without your vote, we won't have the 2/3 plus one.
That's only if we actually voted abstain. If votes are counted, my understanding, from those who actually vote.
Okay.
That's how we've done it so far.
Can I say something? This is Jan from Dutch EOS.
Yes, please do, Jan.
Last week we've talked about it. It hasn't been mentioned today. That one of the main risks is, of course, we will be creating new whales. And with 18 million, we'll be creating more new whales. And I'm concerned about that people will take the increase actually as an opportunity to create whales who may vote for themselves, which may potentially also other block producers who are not part of this at the moment, who are looking to enter, will maybe think, hey, there's no chance for us. This is a group who has all the voting power, and they may turn also against us. It may create a lot of negativity. So I'm really concerned about that. We from Dutch EOS also feel that we are mainly investing our time for future payoff, not so much about this immediate payoff. So we would be voting against it.
Can I make a comment too? Oh.
Yes, Jerry. Then Azad, please.
I would maybe amend that these votes or these amounts should be voted through a proxy, like Good Proxy, instead of being voted by an individual. You can just assign the amounts to a proxy that should be voting for people who deserve it after looking at it from a committee.
Is that?
Yes. So
would do that.
Okay. So the concern that Jan has just raised is exactly my concern, and that's why I introduced tip 29 today, and it attempts to address that point. It gives some percentages to take into consideration. So if the number of tokens are being raised to 12 million or 18 million, it highlights that the percentage of that will be more, and how it's going to be interpreted or perceived by outsiders. And one of the points is whether BPs would come in and post-launch, how it's looked at if one particular entity with a brand name has ended up with 3% or 4% of the total number of tokens.
Ian, would you like to go ahead?
Yes, thank you. I'd like to just sort of comment on Jan's comment. So one of the things that really appealed to me about Telos was that it is advocating for a relatively egalitarian token economy. And I certainly think it's important to maintain that in order to attract future contributors. That said, we have to recognize that Good Block needs to be fairly compensated for the tremendous effort they have been putting through since the very beginning. And there's literally no token arrangement that I think would be fair to Good Block that would not result in Good Block having a pretty sizable position of tokens, whether it be 1 or 2%. So Good Block is going to become the dominant player coming out of this effort. And I am comfortable with that. I think Douglas and his team have shown tremendous leadership, and I expect that their high leadership standards will continue post-launch. The other thing I'd like to mention is that when we sort of talk about whales, I think our conversation is skewed a little bit. So let's say we did raise the cap to 18 million, and let's say Goodblock imposed a pledge to self-impose a 50% cap. So they end up with 9 million tokens, which is much more than they were expecting to get into the 6 million. In that scenario, 5% of the tokens would be allocated to the launch group, and Goodblock would end up with about 2.5% of the tokens. Now, this might sound like a lot, but when we think of what a real whale is in the context of, say, Bitcoin or EOS or Ethereum, these are individuals that have 5, 10, 15%, right? So we're nowhere near approaching those levels of influence. And I think if we have a strong participatory democratic culture, people will still be able to vote in what is in the best interest of the network. And although Goodblock will have quite a bit of political influence, they won't have dominant political influence. So I'm comfortable with the direction this conversation is going. But I just want to make the point that there's no scenario here that is fair to Goodblock that does not result in them having a percentage or two of the tokens. So that's it.
That's a good point, Ian. If I could, we were talking about it early on in this group about how the founders tokens shouldn't be voted, or there should be some governance process around voting them, potentially like a proxy forum that manages a proxy with some community input or something like that, since it is a dominant force. So I would be comfortable taking an honor pledge just not to vote them, even for right now, because we want to maintain the voting dynamics that Telos promises without the heavy-handed influence of large stakeholders. So these distributions to me are essentially seed capital in all of our businesses. That's how we would use it at EOS Detroit. We would sell a decent amount of it and actually sustain our business. So Correct. We would distribute it back into the market. And that's how, I don't necessarily think we all need to corrupt Telos with exercising the voting influence of these. And I don't think there's a good way at the protocol level to hard code. So we can't. So it kind of needs to be an honor code. Plus, once you sell them, then whoever buys them can vote them. And there's loopholes there. Like someone here could wash trade their tokens and vote those tokens. Just pointing this out because I've been thinking about this stuff. How do we prevent this? So maybe there's a way that all of these tokens can be. I don't know. I don't know the best route, but I think Rob, if we took an honor pledge, that'd go a long way.
May I ask, when you say using a proxy, can you please elaborate on what you mean by that?
Yeah. So in EOS, we've seen a lot of proxy accounts. So people running basically a campaign to have people delegate the voting rights of the tokens that an individual owns to the proxy. And these proxies publish their philosophies. They publish how they vote. Some of them do transparency reports. There's all kinds of different flavors of proxies. Some of them are run by BPs. Some of them are run by multiple BPs using a multi-signature. All of these tokens could be potentially hard-coded into a proxy that's managed by a governance forum that has maybe some people in the TLG, some people in the community, Telos community even. This is similar to the direction that we want to go with governing the Chintai proxy on EOS, if you're familiar with that, where there's actually more oversight and multiple people weighing into how the choices are made, as opposed to just one individual wielding so much voting power.
Okay, thanks for that, Rob. I've decided, I think that it's good that we don't really put a time limit on these discussions, because I think these are important, but I feel that we are sort of coming to a general conclusion where everyone seems to have had their say. I'm going to suggest that we move to a vote, and that we put the question to the group that we should. Shall we pass? Shall we adopt it 24 amended increase to 18 million? Is that okay with you? In 21 Zephyr, are you happy with that?
Yes, we are happy with
Is there anybody who wants to? Do we want to go right around the houses talking about different numbers, or can I get a general consensus that we are happy with the 18? A lot of people have fell on 18. That's what I'm hearing. That's why I put it. So
I second it.
Thank you, Ian.
Should we be voting on this with a cap, unspecified, but a cap as part of it, or should that be excluded from the vote?
Separate conversation altogether, I believe. I think we got to concentrate one bite at a time here.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think if we've gone down the road of doing these separately, and I think I want to stick to that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a question into the chat to pick the right one, and so please don't put anything to the chat for a moment, please. Can we just, before we vote, can we just double check that that's okay? Shall the Telos Contributors Group adopt 24 amended increase to 18 million? Yes vote is to adopt. Please vote yes, no, or abstain. Okay, off we go, guys, please. Adam, if you can sort out the results and tell me if it's passed or not passed as well, because I won't be able to work it out, if that's okay. Yeah, I wonder why that is. I will also just say for the record that the normal voting rules apply for this, and if Good Block decide not to adopt those normal rules, then that's entirely up to them, but everybody has got a vote on this. It is an open vote, just for the record. Okay then, while we're doing that, I think it's hopefully we've got a couple more slightly less what should I say? Yeah, so the next one is tip 25, contribute unclaimed TCRP funds to the free Telos account created by Douglas. Hopefully Douglas will be happy to talk to this. We have presented it. I think this might be one where I can call for a vote without too much discussion. I don't know whether Douglas can just either reiterate that tip for us, please.
Sure. It felt strange not to talk for so long, actually.
Well, it was. Well, I'm not going to say it was nice, Douglas, but it's great to hear your voice again.
You can say that. It's fair. So the tip 25 deals with the fact that we have allocated 1 million Telos to the community rewards pool. In the rules of the community rewards pool, we have noted what happens if the claimed rewards go over this, which is at this point seems a very unlikely outcome. Also unlikely outcome is to actually hit exactly 1 million Telos. So we currently have no protocol for what to do with these funds in the most likely scenario, which is that we don't use the entire 1 million funds. And so we need some solution for this, so that and I'm proposing that possibly the best solution is to put those into a fund that goes to creating free new user accounts with adequate protections on Telos. I've spoken to the development team. We have some really good ideas around this, which I'm about about abuse prevention, which I'm happy to share if anyone wants in the discussion. It also, like, all of these things are open to floor debate and amendment, as we've seen. So if people want to suggest other uses, that's great. The reason some discussion in the group had come around just keeping that program going. The problem with that approach, in my eyes, is that it actually requires a very large amount of administration, and there's no way for that administration to happen under the current version. So I think if we want to do ongoing community rewards, we should do those through the worker proposal system, which we will have, or the Telos Foundation. So that is why I'm proposing that we use these in a way with common sense protections against abuse to create new user accounts. And this does not limit any of the other ways that we intend to make 1 million new user accounts. It's just one more way. I personally feel that making it possible for new users to come onto the network free and an unrestrained way, except for with protections against abuse, is probably one of the single best uses for inflation on the system, right up there with development. Any questions?
I did have one, Douglas, I put in the document, is how does the cutoff get determined, as to if somebody actually hasn't claimed their rewards yet?
Sure. So that will be the actual mechanics of that will be determined, but the guiding principle will be to ensure that everyone who has a true claim and has filed in a timely manner, even with maybe a little bit of a extension, who knows, to the extent that we can, gets their Telos. We are absolutely not seeking to limit the rewards of any Telos community rewards pool participant. That is absolutely not what we're trying to do.
Sorry, James at Good Block. I just wanted to point out the process for that, which is that everybody has to submit for their community rewards, and then those accounts are created, and those community rewards go into that account. So the account will just sit there; it'll be created. We don't have any real reason to burn that account or anything.
Thank you, James. Anybody else like to contribute to the debate? Ian?
Yeah, so my perspective here really quick, I'm sorry, Roger, is I do think that there is a need to fund a user account creation. What I'm concerned about this proposal is that we will be capitalizing that effort with an unknown quantity. I think probably a healthier approach would be to create a fund specifically for that, and we can discuss what that number ought to be, 500,000, 1 million, 2 million Telos, I don't know. And then burn all the excess tokens from the community rewards pool. I think sort of keeping these as two separate objectives might be cleaner, and that's something that I would be willing to support.
Haven't we already got that though for create some initiative for creating new accounts? Yeah. So as Douglas already said, this is not to replace that; it's just to give it a bit of extra bunts, really, isn't it? But sorry to interrupt again, but if I could just go back to James, what you were saying, if you've already, if the tokens have already been distributed to those accounts, then how does the mechanics of transferring it elsewhere go if they've not been? How do you know they've not been claimed if an account's been created? I suppose is what I'm asking.
Oh, I see. So the unclaimed ones, we're not automatically distributing all the amount. We'll distribute it all to all the amounts that everybody has claimed, but the amount that people have claimed is going to be certainly less than the 1 million that we planned on giving away. See what I'm saying? We're not automatically percentage-wise like pie slicing, dividing up all the community rewards. We're just doing it for what people have actually claimed, and they're capped at 10,000 per person.
Right, got you. So
and we'll leave time
left over. Yeah.
If somebody says, "Oh my gosh," if Telos fan, who I'm sure we all love,
yeah,
right? It's my new favorite guy or girl or whoever. So let's say Telos fan comes, or any other participant comes to us and says, "Hey, I was hit by a car and I've been in a coma for whatever amount of time." We're going to leave ample amount of time.
What are you wishing on our supporters?
I'm not wishing that on. I'm just saying, if anyone were to come to us and say, "Hey, these are the contributions I make for whatever valid reason, other than just not paying attention, or possibly even not paying attention, who knows?" They come to us. We won't be quick on the trigger to move this. We just want to be able to. So we'll leave ample time for people to come in and for these funds to go to their intended use when it seems clear that these funds have not, that these funds are not going to be claimed, only at that time will we transfer it to the account creation.
James?
Sorry, one last thing. This distribution will be different than the TFRP, for instance, where we'll make the accounts before activation, but we won't actually do the distribution until after activation, just because it's going to take us a while to process all this stuff. So there'll be time to contact people. We'll send out mass emails, all those kinds of things. So hopefully everybody who's submitted will have a really good idea where they're at and when.
Okay, thank you for that.
Just thinking about young Anthony, that's all.
The actual administration process is going to be time consuming, right? Because people have to send us their claims, and then there has to be some level of substantiation going on. And while it may not be, we may not look at every single claim, we will certainly look at a lot of claims to ensure that people are generally being truthful, and then a deeper level of discussion or exploration if people are not. So this is a time consuming process. We actually need to figure out who's going to do it, because it's going to be time consuming, it means that there's going to be time for stragglers to come in and get in before we do this distribution.
Cool. So sounds good to me. I mean, I'm happy to, if there's no other questions, I'm happy to be the one to propose we vote on it, if that helps.
Thank you, Roger. Do we have a seconder? I think that was Jan seconding. Thank you, Jan. Can you sort your mic out for us, please? It's a bit quiet. Okay. Thank you, Mark, as well. So we've got Roger proposed it, Jan seconded it, Mark has in the chat as well, but thank you for that. So I've posted the question now, shall the Telos Contributions Group adopt TIP 25? Please vote yes to adopt, no or abstain. Thank you very much. If you'd like to vote now, ladies and gentlemen, it's like a game show host. Please vote now. I'm going to get some voting music and put it on. Let's sort that out, Rog. Voting music.
Having just sent my vote to somebody privately 3 times, I should probably concentrate on that.
Probably. It's gone past in the chat now, but the TIP 24 was passed. It was passed. I can't see now. Where have we got to? It was passed. I've lost it in the chat. Come on, Jim. Come on. Okay, then. So TIP 24.
25 yes, 3 no, 3 abstain, 3. It passed.
Thank you, Jerry. I just got there, but you just beat me to it. So thank you very much for that. Okay, everybody. Right then. So thank you very much. We have now moved on to, I think, if we can all do our stuff. Adam, thank you. So TIP 26, this is Jerry's adoption of the distribution of the TFVT tokens. I think this one's pretty straightforward. If I just ask Jerry to just recap on it, I think this one is probably going to go through on the nod, but if Jerry could do his usual concise report, I would really appreciate it.
There, I had to unmute, sorry. Initially, the Telos Foundation voter token was going to be split into 10 groupings, where the people who put in a lot of work would get 10 times the vote of people that didn't put in as much. And because this is such a close community, I thought that we should have a closer grouping. And so I propose that we just split it into 5 groups. And so your vote will count more, as the one who has put in the most will only get 5 times the least. That's it.
Okay, thank you for that, Jerry. There was a lot of chat in the Slack channels, which we came to general consensus. But Douglas, do you want to make a point, please?
Yeah, thank you, Jim. I just wanted to reiterate the point I made when this was introduced. As the author of the previous version, I think this is a much better, more egalitarian approach, much more within the ethos of Telos, and I fully support Jerry's proposal.
Okay, thank you for that. I think this one has had lots of time to sit both on Slack and in here. So I'd like to invite someone to call for a vote and get a seconder, please.
Move to vote. JT from Kanos.
Thank you, JT. Seconder.
I'll second.
Thank you, Roger. Okay then, so I placed in the chat the question: shall the Telos contributors group adopt tip 26? If you'd like to vote, please. We're getting quicker at this, guys and girls. We need to have a system, and then we shall close the group. Yeah. Just to get good at it, we'll disband it. Very good, thank you. Thank you, James. Okay then, so our next tip is tip 27, which I think is, I think this tip has had its very own internet show, which I think is very good. So we are now going to hand over to Jan, if that's okay, to talk about tip 27, creating a RAM reserve for the RAM administrator. Jan, can I hand over to you, please? I can't hear you, Jan. Still can't hear you. Sorry, we're getting nothing.
Hey Jan, if you click the arrow next to the microphone, next to the mute button, it may have changed your microphone input. Maybe. I heard it click. You there? Just talk now.
No.
Okay.
Well, there it is.
Yeah.
Hey. Thank you.
That's amazing. Yeah, indeed. I clicked another microphone, but now it works. All right. Sorry, guys. Right. Tip 27. So this is about a method to make sure that in the very beginning we'll be immediately in control of the RAM and the RAM prices, because due to the way the Bancor algorithm works, you can buy very cheaply in the beginning, and gradually when a RAM is being bought and the amount reserved goes up, the prices go up until we reach a certain equilibrium. So with EOS, for the last 2 months, it has been quite stable, around 55 to 60% reserved. So definitely we will not stay in the 10, 20 or 30% region. What the proposal is actually that the RAM administration receives immediately when we create the accounts such an amount of RAM that the total RAM reserved hits 50%. Then when people can start buying RAM, we will sell RAM just a few percentage points above the public guidance price that we will issue, so that we will be able to, from the moment number one, maintain that public guidance price. So that is the key reason, being able to immediately focus and zoom in on a PGP and maintain it. Secondly, also to prevent a lot of speculation in the beginning, which is bound to happen. I mean, if we don't do anything, for sure there will be hundreds, at least tens, but probably hundreds of people ready with very smart algorithms to buy straight away as soon as possible. We may not be able to buy into it at that time. because we also want to build up a reserve. And so that's the second reason we want to prevent that. We don't think that anyone on this blockchain who really wants to use it feels there is an interest that these people have that opportunity. I would expect that they say, hey, this is the people's blockchain. Let this RAM just be released into the market at a normal approach. Because if this was a normal RAM market, yes, the price would wobble a bit at the beginning, but it wouldn't be a factor of 10 or 50 off. So that's something that is particular due to the Banker algorithm, and an issue that you have with the Banker algorithm when you start. The third reason is that we will make profits with that, because we then get the RAM cheaper than anybody else. The profits that we will make will be used to give RAM grants to DApps. So that's the three reasons. Let's open it up for discussion.
I suppose the big question is, did Douglas get sold on the idea on Telos Talks? Were you able to be talked around to be in favour of it, Douglas?
Well, you didn't listen, Roger?
I did, but, it was kind of a long show.
Yeah, okay. All right. It was a cliffhanger, right? To be continued. Certainly. So my concern, to reiterate, is that while I support many of the aims of this, and after discussing with Jan, I actually think that of the options, doing this or not doing this, right, tip 27 is actually the one that's probably better for the interest of the network. My concern is that the Telos Foundation is established to have no special privileges over what any other user might have. So I am still concerned about that. Jan made a pretty compelling point, and here I'm going to make his point for him. So he said somebody's going to get that windfall.
Yeah.
Without this, it's going to go to someone, it could go to anyone, right? And there's no avoiding that windfall. If we do this, RAM starts out, we eliminate that crazy spike, right? And it actually starts out at a stable place, pretty much near where the PGP is likely to be, and the windfall is captured for the benefit of the network, as to be distributed in RAM grants. I support everything there. Was actually waiting to hear the debate here to see which direction I was going to vote, because I do still feel my concern, but as I consider this, I think it's very possible that the benefits to the network, especially at this nascent time, outweigh that. I'm very concerned also, though, anytime we say things like just this once, it's worth it in the end, it's the greater good, all those things I think become a slippery slope. I'm still undecided. I may abstain due to being undecided, but I was hoping to hear more discussion. So I'd like to hear what everybody else in the group thinks. But thanks for asking my opinion, Roger.
Yeah, I think it's better to give that benefit to the foundation over somebody that's programmed an algorithm, I think.
JT?
Just as a point of clarity, we're talking about doing this, buying this RAM for the foundation before the lib is frozen, or the block after activation. I mean, we're talking about special privileges for the foundation again here. That's really the debate, correct?
I think there are two technical options. Either that the tokens with which we will buy the RAM are not staked, so that we get to buy them earlier. That's one option. The other option is even that we immediately at injection put in 300,000 Telos worth of RAM, which is about 4.5 to 5 gigabytes of RAM. So I think that's a more technical decision that we need to take, which one works best when we set up the chain. But yes, in any case, that we have the first opportunity to buy.
Anybody else from our technical background, from our developer team, want to pitch in?
Yeah. If there's the RAM grant funds during the initial setup, we could make that transfer happen before we freeze the lib. And then the RAM price would be established on launch.
Thank you, Jerry.
Yeah, I mean, clearly there's ways to do it. I suppose the question is whether we should or not, isn't it? Really, that's what we've got to decide on.
Exactly.
Madalin Barbulescu from Amplified here. I wanted to ask, is this supposed to be like an account that the foundation holds and they can deliberately sell back some RAM to regulate the price, or it'll work automatically from a contract?
Sorry, it's cut out for me. Could you repeat the question one more time?
I wanted to ask if first off, if my understanding is correct, we're going to buy a lot of RAM for the foundation account, right?
Correct.
And will this be attributed to an account that someone has access to, or multi-sig or something, or it'll be just a smart contract that nobody has access to? We can lock up a smart contract that just by itself sells back the RAM as it needs to.
Good question. Being able to access that account, there is probably going to be around 300,000 Telos worth of RAM to buy, and after we bought actually 50%, the market value will be around 500,000. So at least multi-sig, but a smart contract is also an option, because we now need to quickly develop actually a method with which we can automatically sell above a certain threshold. So maybe that is due to with a smart contract, and then that would be the way forward.
So you cut out right at the start of that, Jan. So are you saying that it isn't a smart contract at the moment and it will be done manually by yourself?
No, I'm saying it should. I would like to automate it if we have enough time. If the go-no-go is going to put forward, we will have enough time, and I would prefer to have it as a smart contract. But definitely, in any case, it shouldn't be that I can singly, or any person can singly sign on that account, because there will be a value between 300,000 and 500,000 on that account.
Well, it'll be more than that, right? So the foundation should be like a multi-sig account, and then if we were to do it manually, if it wasn't automatic, then the foundation would listen to the recommendation of the RAM Advisory Council. The way that I see it,
I maybe a bit too much detail, but I would actually propose that we make a separate account within the Telos Foundation, and that RAM account would be between 300 and 500,000 if we go along with this approach.
I see. Okay.
Rob, would you mind verbalizing what you said in the chat for us, please?
Sure. Okay? I was just echoing. Justin was asking if there were full transparency around RAM grants and all of the administration and governance that the Telos Foundation will need, plus the RAM director, coupled with what we were talking about earlier about potentially pledging not to vote founders tokens. What I was getting at in the chat was essentially, I would rather see us delay another half a month or something on Telos launch to build out what we need to launch correctly than fumble in because we wanted to rush it out the door. So if we are making decisions and people are like, well, okay, if we're uncovering new things that we need to do before launch, of course, we don't want to increase the scope of the launch, but if this is related to governing the chain and how in the launch conditions and making sure things are set up right and accountable, I would rather see us push off launch. And that was, I mean, I don't want to side rail the chat into should we launch or not, because I know there's good reasons to set a firm date too that Douglas has expressed, but we only get to launch once, so let's do it right.
Yeah. Okay, Rob. Thanks. I sort of set you up for that, so that was my fault in that essence. I mean, I think we're not quite sure. Well, you know, we haven't got the foundation up and running, but I think there's going to have to be a certain amount of leniency given to the idea that this working group has worked really well, and I think that I don't see any reason why we won't set up a foundation that will share the values and the work ethic that this group has brought forward. So I think we could be pretty happy that Jan will get the support of the foundation, and that the foundation will give up any special privileges it gets pretty quickly. So I do hear what Douglas says about saying this is just a one-off. However, I do think that hopefully the people who are voted in will have the sort of best interests of Telos at heart, and also the sort of the same work ethic and infrastructure that we've got here. So I would be willing. I think that that's less of an issue personally, but I best shut up now and let anybody else contribute. I don't think we've got anybody else wanting to come in. So again, we need to ask for someone to move to a vote and to second, please.
I move to vote.
Thank you.
I'll second.
Thank you, Roger. And if I can get the correct tip, I shall put it in the chat in a moment. Okay, so shall the Telos contributors group adopt tip 27? Yes vote is to adopt. Please vote no. Yes, no, now, sorry. I think we should have a system where you have to pre-enter your thing and then press play all at the same time. I'll work on that one.
We can all do that on the next one, if you dare.
Yeah, I'll work that out somewhere. Okay then, so we have, we've only been on the call an hour and 8 minutes, so we're doing quite well, guys. We've now moved down to tip 28. So if we could, tip 28 is modifying the token economy. Ian, are you in a position or one of your team to talk to the tip for us, please?
Yes. Can you guys hear me all right?
Yeah.
Great. So tip 28 was attempting to address a number of different questions concerning the token economy. Given the outcome of tip 24, I would like to actually withdraw tip 28. I do think that I'd like to see some progress made in terms of capitalizing the foundation as well as the worker proposal system. Similarly, in regards to the 1-year deadline for exchanges, that's actually been the most popular proposal that Amplified Telos has put out. During our survey, we had over 70% of the respondents support that proposal. So that's something else we should consider as well. But given sort of like the new questions in terms of caps and token allocations, I think it would be healthy for the group as a whole if we withdraw this tip at the moment, give everybody a chance to kind of process where we are right now, and then we'll look to amending this tip for a future conversation.
Okay, thank you for that, Ian. I welcome that, and with that we shall move on. So thank you very much. Again, a lot of this work has been done in the Slack channel, and we need to be working in the tips channel to be working these things out, not just on these calls. So again, I'll reiterate the need for doing that. And I think that we've got a system whereby it's not yet perfect, but we are actually moving in that channel. So please join that channel if you wish to contribute to the tips. Okay then, so we're now on to section 5, which is the working group status updates. We haven't got much in here. I didn't, to be honest, I didn't expect to get down quite this far, but we have done. So I don't know whether we want to just do a quick buzz through, and if anybody wants to say their piece, then please do so. Arbitration, is there anybody who wants to talk? We have got one item in there, so is there any more arbitration? Just want to elaborate, please? Okay, so it says that we're very close to 3 additional candidates. So I guess
I will say that I think everything that was waiting on, on arbitration, all those arbitrators, now that we've adopted that language, I will today update those documents and to reflect that, and then we can get them out. And my feeling, and I think Brett, my understanding what Brett's communicated is probably that will give a lot of additional people the comfort to join us.
Okay, thank you for that, Douglas. Badge system, Robin, James, have we covered everything that we need to so far on the badge system? James?
No comment.
There's just one thing about the bounty system. Ian wanted to talk again about the tips commissions. So next time we have a bounty system call, we should have that conversation. So if you want to be involved in that, please show up so that we can dig into that. Thanks.
Can you just remind us when that call is again, please, James?
That's at Tuesdays at 17:30 UTC. It's on the team up calendar.
Thank you very much. Okay, community rewards. I think we've covered that one at the moment, I'm guessing. Yeah. DAPS outreach, Justin, Sukesh, does anybody want to say anything? Are we okay? Development. Peter or anybody from the development side want to come in with anything? No? Okay. Oh, that looks exciting. Exchange outreach, Bethel, Roger.
Yes, that's me. So definitely 1, possibly 2 new exchange announcements imminent, and obviously pipeline work being done on that. So can't quite talk about that just yet, but coming. So watch this space.
Keeper of the information, Roger. That's amazing.
I had a question, Roger.
I'm only doing as I'm told. Sorry, go on, Rob.
Oh, no problem. Related to exchange outreach, I brought this up in the channel yesterday in response to Sukesh, who said, essentially, there's an exchange listing. If we come up with 22,000, we can purchase this listing for Telos. It's on blockport.co, I think. And I was just curious if we could have a little discussion around TFRP contributors pooling funds to fund exchange listings in exchange for slices, because I would be interested in putting up money to help get a few more exchange listings for strategic initiatives, essentially. And I'm just curious if we can do that or not. And I know it basically rests on the work group chairs of exchange outreach deciding that's an okay way to contribute.
Yeah, so we've covered that in our meeting today. I mean, there's follow-up point on that to discuss, but basically it's like the old United States does not negotiate with terrorists line, isn't it? We don't pay listing fees for exchanges prior to launch, so that's basically got to be the position on that at the moment. But if there's strong enough feel within the group that we want to try and look at doing that differently, then obviously that could be discussed. But the first follow-up point on that, Rob, that we came up with at the meeting earlier was whether or not the pie slicer could actually do that on a 1-for-1, dollar-for-dollar basis. So I was going to post that question in Slack and follow up on that there.
Yep, there is a cash field. The cash spend gets factored in. If you put how much cash you spend to do something and it's approved by your work group chair, you can spend cash. That's how we put that in the guidelines originally as well. It's just not the most popular way, since we all have more things to do with our time than money in relation to launching this. So it's possible. The system supports it. It is 1 slice per dollar. And I just figure, there's enough people here that may be interested in pooling together to strategically get some of these listings. And I'm not sure, as far as going deeper into if we should or not, I think that's a whole separate discussion. But I'm just curious if this is something the work group chairs would support.
What kind of fees are we talking about?
This one was $22,000 approximately.
Can I just jump in before we spend a lot of time on this? Because I think this conversation is actually better had in the work group. It's come up again because there was a new exchange that came forward with a fee. But to really fully discuss it, it's a bigger conversation, because if we're going to approve one and find a system for it, there are several in the past that we have already said no to with very similar fees. So we really have to step back a little bit and revisit all of those to be able to make a decision about this. So it's a little bit more involved than having a conversation in here. I think the takeaway for this group is that if we can define that there's a system and it works and everybody's on board, that then we spread our wings for more support from this bigger group. So we'll kind of just keep you posted on that.
Yeah, so we've got a couple of follow-up items from the meeting that we want to put through the channel so everybody can talk about there. And so if we could do that, I think that'd be the best next step for that.
Yeah, because we're not opposed to finding some sort of solution. We've had this conversation several times, and a decision gets made and then it comes up again. So let's just discuss it a little bit more deeply and involved on work group time on Slack. But thank you for everybody's willingness to find a solution with us.
Sure. Yeah. Let me know when you figure it out, because I know if we launch in 4 days, then we have a small window to do it, right?
I'm typing the question now.
Okay. So, thanks a lot, Roger. So governance, I don't think we've got anything to say, I'm guessing, nor with meetings. Other than...
Oh, you missed off Beth, Jim, next item.
Oh, Beth.
External comms.
No,
external comms.
It's
Beth.
the EX and the EX. Everybody thinks it's the same group, but it's not.
Oh, no. Oh, sorry.
No worries. Nothing huge to say. I think considering how some of these tips are kind of landing, there's a little bit more work this group is going to have to do, just kind of publicly, to kind of spread some of those messages around. We're having a little bit of a personnel shuffle in the next week, so people that are in this work group, you may see some extra requests for extra assistance for some things. So kind of just toe the line of the Telos, kind of community activist kind of rah-rah, but just if you're part of this work group, keep a close eye on those conversations in the Slack, because we might need some extra help for a little bit.
Okay, thank you, Beth. Is there any other work group chairs wish to contribute anything that I've, because looking down, there's nothing in there. I don't really want to read every single one out. I can't quite see the point in that. So if anybody wants to say anything regarding their working group, then please speak now. Okay, thank you very much. So we're now down to new submissions or resubmissions of tips. So we've got, the only ones I've got at the moment is tip 3, the establishment of common use snapshots for air grabs, which is Jesse. Do you want to outline that quick, Jesse? Is this something that we can go to a vote on, or can you just outline for us, please?
Yes, sure. Yeah, it's been in there for a while. It's number 3, and I know it's been discussed on calls before, but at a high level, it's a proposal that we have a contract on chain that stores snapshots, and that those happen on some schedule, maybe every couple months, and that we retire them after another schedule. So maybe they stick around for 3 months and we put them up there every 2 or something like that. And basically, from a technical perspective, this allows, it kind of solves some of the problems of the airdrop model that costs so much money in RAM to distribute your token to everybody on the chain, on the network. This allows people to call your token contract and say, I want these tokens. And there's models out there right now where people call it, they end up paying for the RAM, and they end up with a 0 balance. And then later on, the token developer has to come in and fill those 0 balances with some value that they have off chain, like a spreadsheet or something. So this just makes it so as you write a token contract, you can query another contract for a known snapshot balance. And that's what this contract would be. And the suggestion by Douglas, which I think is a great one, is that we put the first snapshot into this contract. I think, I I want to say 30 days or 28 days after launch, and call it the, Douglas, you want to tell me the name you came up with, the Telos Original Snapshot?
It's the Telos Original, we called it, and actually we've already voted on this to do it. And to Jim's earlier point, this is another one that's had a show discussing it. You and I talked about this pretty much in depth, how when we were talking about the original snapshot on Telos Talks, I think it goes very well hand in hand with that, and also very well hand in hand with the TIP 5 token standard, which we probably should vote, even though, I think that'll be a quick vote to adopt. Everybody likes it. But I think this is a great thing. We had not voted on this yet because early on, at the time this came up, we weren't really trying to impose things on the Telos Foundation through these votes. But, since that time, it's become obvious that we need to do that. And so I think it's very appropriate that we do this. I think everyone should be familiar with it. We can discuss it more in Slack. But yeah, it's 29 days, and then we would do it on an ongoing basis. And this is really a great service that the Telos Foundation could do for developers.
Okay, then. So if that's okay, what I'm going to suggest is that we actually stick to our procedure that we've got at the moment, and we can put that tip as the first tip to vote on Tuesday's meeting. And also in the Slack channel, we can look at any other tips that are back down the line, whether we can vote those through before we have any discussions, because things like this I think have been discussed, and we just need to formally vote on them. And we can make sure, if we can have a chat in the Slack channels, which ones I can put on the agenda to just bring us forward for a very quick vote at the start of the next meeting. Is that okay with everybody? Anybody want to come in on that?
I'm good with that.
Thank you, Jesse.
We'll vote Tuesday.
Okay then, so we've now got a tip 29, which I've not had a chance to look at, but I think I've got a link on the agenda. So Azad, do you want to talk to tip 29? Is Azad still on the call? So let me check my
next.
I think it's going to be like that. I think you're right. Yeah. Okay then. So we'll have to we'll put that onto on the agenda for next week.
I think after the vote today, anyway, on expanding the founders' rewards, that he's going to be editing it.
Okay, yeah, I think that's probably so. If we get in the Slack channel, on the tips channel with that, and then we can bring that forward on Tuesday. Okay, then. So the Telos checklist. Is there anything that has gone green recently, Douglas, or is there anything that? Yeah, off you go.
I'm sorry. I just went through in this section before we go through and added and wanted to introduce the TIP 5 token standard as something to vote next time we vote. This is very early. It's a very early tip. We've discussed it a lot. We are frankly practically using it, and the vote would only be a formality to accept it as a standard. And so I'd like to introduce that to be voted on our next voting as well.
Okay, thank you, Douglas. And I'm also going to say that if there's anything else in that tip list which I'm not aware of, that again is very similar to tip 3 and tip 5, and as much as that it's been discussed, then that will be brought to the next meeting without having it to be presented. So I'm going to take an executive decision on that, and people have to instruct me in the tips channel which ones are and which ones aren't. So I'll have to be guided by the group on that. So the Telos checklist, has there anything recently gone green, Douglas? And can we have an update on the particular yellows at the moment?
Yes, just pulling it up now. We actually have had quite a bit go green. Oh, thanks for screen sharing. We have had quite a bit go green lately, especially so. To give it, I guess we're starting at the top. Let's just discuss the two yellows: removal of non-producing BPs has actually been completed and submitted to Jerry and JT and everybody for testing. Ed completed that, and so we expect that to, and it's had quite a bit of review by Madeline and the whole group. So I think it's for edge case for protecting against various edge cases. I think there's a very strong chance that will go green before we meet on Wednesday. Rewrite reg producer to include BPJSON format. Peter and I and the others around Good Block have looked at that and found and discussed some solutions along with the rest of the entire development group. And I think there's a very good chance that would be green before Wednesday. Governance, the one that's yellow still there is the Telos Foundation voting tokens. And that is that Craig and I are working on that. That essentially will be a tip 5 token that has certain transfer features disabled for anyone but the creator to support what we do. We've talked through that, and that is I think we're well able to do that. In conjunction with that, Peter and I have talked about, and the rest of the team have talked about building additional accounts that those would be unique accounts that those would be fed into. And then we've brought to the group the idea that they need to, that we will go out and seek everybody's private key, public keys for creating those. I'm sorry. So that I think is soon to go. Ratify, amend, and worker proposal contract are both in late stages. I don't know if those will be green or not come Wednesday. They will be close. Arbitration contract is yellow, and to be entirely honest, I would be very surprised if that was green on Wednesday, largely owing to the need to perform testing. For context, my personal belief after looking at this is the arbitration contract is so complex that if it were actually a standalone DApp on EOS or Telos, it would be the most complex DApp, or one of the top 3 most complex DApps in the entire EOS ecosystem, to give a little context on that. So I think testing is warranted. At the same time, that encompasses both the election and also the processes of arbitrators. And there's some discussion around the fact that since we have a month, we're going to take a month to election period to elect our first arbitrators. As long as the election functions are fully working and tested, and the others are working, seem to be working well, but maybe don't have the same level of testing, then we feel it may be legitimate to mark that as green, because we will have time to do the additional testing in the time that the election is happening. So we're looking at are we fulfilling our promise if we make sure that subset of functions is fully tested, knowing that there's no way that we could use any of the other functions until the arbitrators are elected anyway. That's where that stands. And then finally, include snapshot accounts. My understanding is those have actually been included several times on StageNet and launch rehearsal testnet launches, like 30 times maybe. And that once we restart the chain, we are going to be injecting the testnet chain. We're going to be injecting those in. So I think that can go to green Monday. So certainly by Wednesday. That's my report on those that are not green. If anybody has any questions about anything that has turned green this week, I'm happy to discuss those as well.
I'm curious if the arbitration will the green dot also include a front end for the arbitrators, or is that something that we'll plan on adding after launch?
So there are a great question, JT. Thank you. So there are a number of different types of front ends that we could have for some of these. For example, there could be a front end in Squirrel. There could be a front end in Telos. There could be a front end that's a votable portal through something like Scatter. We have determined that because some of these are out of our hands, we've determined that our promises are fulfilled in the MVP sense if there is one accessible way of doing this, each of these. So if there's not one accessible way that people can do this, whether it be Squirrel, whether it be Telos, and spoiler alert, it's going to be Squirrel because Marlon Williams of EOS Miami is doing incredible work, and he's already adding a voter interface for all of these things. And I'll let him speak to his expectations, but based on current tracking, I think that we will call that green when there is a voting portal in Squirrel or elsewhere. Do you want to speak to that at all, Marlon?
Yeah, and you're right, Douglas. We have added a lot of governance functionality into Squirrel, so you guys should expect that to be in the next release.
And when is that? Can you tell us? Can you give us a reason, an expectation of when that new release is going to be?
Yeah, we timed it right before the next vote, so within the next 4 to 5 days. We should release it.
Dude, you're a hero.
That's excellent news, Marlon.
Marlon Williams, everybody. I'm serious.
Yeah.
Amazing. Thank you.
Thanks, Douglas and team.
Thank you. That's fantastic news. Okay, then. So if that's okay, I'm going to. I think that gives us quite a lot of food for thought regarding next Tuesday and next Wednesday, and also how we can manage the expectation of the community. I'm very positive to hear that, Douglas, because I do think that we've got some movement on the yellows regarding whether I think that's where we'll discuss that on Wednesday, and I think we can come to a decision on that on Wednesday. So I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
But our standard is all green. Our standard does not change. All green checks.
No, I appreciate your standards all green, Douglas. And we'll discuss that on Wednesday. And whether how we go to a green. So I just think there's a little bit of wiggle room, if you don't mind me saying. I know you won't admit to that, but I think there might be. So there we go. Okay, so the date of next meeting, the time of date of next meeting, I have got as the 30th of this month, same time, same back channel, and all that. I just think, just as a quick note, I think that we're going to carry on with these, even on after the go no go launch, and we're going to keep these as they are, and they were disbanded on activation rather than on launch. So I'm just going to keep going rather than have to go through disbanding this and doing it, because we need to. Douglas, have you got a question?
I only wanted to know, I see the voting on tip 27, but I'm wondering if there's an official count. It seems to have failed.
Yes, I was going to mention that in Slack, to be honest, but I think that has tip 27 has failed, although I was going to go and look at that in detail, but it would seem that it has failed, so we need to have another way of doing that, or that's going to go back to Jan for discussion, or if we can get in the Slack channels and come very quickly to a new tip or revised tip on that one.
Actually, with 17 yes and 4 no and 15 abstain, it would pass.
Someone needs to talk to me about that. So I'm sorry, but
our voting rules so far have been that if somebody actually abstains by not voting at all, then it is not counted. If they vote by voting abstain, then that essentially counts. As a no. So if anyone wants to revisit that based on that understanding, that we could do that. But I think it's very clear to ask: did people not understand that? And if so, I don't know. Did people understand that was the way the votes have been counted to date? I want this to be. Jim, what do you think about? I mean,
I hadn't realised that. Can I ask? Yeah, what's the difference between an abstain and a no then? If an abstain is taken as a no,
we've totally given up on our 1 hour meetings, and now it's just like we hopped in here. Oh, this will take 15 minutes.
It's never going to take 2 minutes. Whoever that is, ought to mute.
Okay, well, maybe we should stop and just discuss it on Slack and see if we want to discuss that issue again next time. I don't know, Jim. That's up to you, sir.
Yeah. I think we'll do that. I think we'll close the meeting now, and we will go into Slack. And again, that will be tip 27, or re-looking at the votes will go to top of the agenda for Tuesday. So we have got until Tuesday to sort that all out. Again, thank you for your time, everybody, and I'll see you on the next call. Cheerio. Oh, go Telos.
Thanks, everyone.
Go Telos. Yes. Cheerio. Bye.
See ya, guys.
Good afternoon.
Bye.
Good night.
Bye, guys. Thanks, everyone.